Okay, so thank you. So that's been set up for broadcasting. It just means then, it stops 3 or 4 different steps where I have to record it and put it up and everything else. Okay. So now I'm just going to share the slides and we can just take it on from there. Okay, so thank you for joining, everybody. My name is Parveen. I work as a professor of nursing and professor of gender-based violence at the University of Sheffield and Doncaster and Bassetlaw Teaching Hospitals. And these workshops, we do a series of workshops once every month where we talk about something related to research, something related to writing for publications, and basically something academic. And this all is to contribute to the agenda of increasing research capacity among nurses, midwives, and allied health professionals. So the workshops primarily have started aiming at nurses and midwives and allied health professionals, but anyone actually can come and join us. And we encourage participants from, regardless of your role, if you are an allied health professional, if you're a nurse or a midwife or a doctor or another scientist, because the principles of writing for publications or proposal or anything to do academic does not change depending on what your discipline is. There may be some small little idiosyncrasies depending on what you want to do, but generally speaking, they all pretty much same. And the other thing which I would like usually with these workshops is that also we work in silos where we think that, we are different in this way and we are different in that way and we do things differently. And I would like people to work more together to be able to understand that, there are less differences and more similarities. And like with sustainable development goals and other aspects, we have realized that we work better to solve problems if we work through various disciplines rather than working within our own disciplines, because then working with other disciplines means that it allows us to see there is more than one way of solving a particular problem, and therefore we can work through it. So that's something. I'm not kind of very well, so might see coughing, so I apologize for that if that happens. Hopefully I'll try and avoid it, but it's something out of my control. So before I go any further, I would also like to introduce Sarah. Me and Sarah do both of these workshops together. Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself and say something about you?
Thanks, Parveen. Yeah, I'm Sarah Gardner. I recognise quite a few names on the call, but not everyone. Actually, I've had a rebrand. I was the clinical librarian. I'm now a clinical evidence specialist for the Trust. I know, just new badge.
Does that change your role?
No, it's identical. I've just had a makeover. So I've been working with Parveen, contributing to these webinars where it does fall within my kind of remit, but the expertise is all Parveen's. But I can help support research through the Trust if you are a Trust employee. So do contact me. I'll be popping our library web address in the chat so that you can check out our supporting research pages if I haven't plugged that quite enough to death. I've also got another link I'm going to put in about your professional roles. We're collecting data on the people that are attending our webinars. So I'm going to put a link into a word cloud generator in a second. So if you can add your professional role to our word cloud, that would be marvelous.
This just helps us to understand where people are coming from and what would be their particular needs. And it just really helps us. It wouldn't require you quite a lot. Just click on this link and just write your professional role, even if you see that role showing into the cloud, because what it would do is when you put that in, and if there are more people, that word just gets bigger and bigger. So that's how it works. So try that and you'll see it's cool actually. So that's that. Victoria, do you mind putting it on the word cloud as well, please? Thank you. Okay, so that's this. Next thing which I would like to do is, let me see if you all have the ability to open your mic, which I think you have. So rather than me going off the tangent, it would be useful to know, what do you expect from this session? Do you have any particular questions that you wanted an answer to, and that's why you joined it? or what would you like to, and I appreciate that you may not have a very clear idea. You know, when we go to something, a session or something like that, we just want to know the whole thing, and we may not be able to think through what my specific question are, but sometimes you may have that sort of an idea. So just tell me, what is it that you're expecting from this workshop or from this webinars? What would you like to learn, or you have any specific question?
So I've just started year 3 of my, I'm Nikki, I've just started year 3 of my ACP Masters. So I'm into dissertation now. I kind of know roughly the kind of things I want to look at, but I am lost in how to really pin down a research question and then to be able to do a proposal around that. So I'm hoping that I'll get a bit of insight and be able to focus my thoughts a little bit after today.
Thank you, Nikki. And you're doing a literature review, or are you doing an actual piece of research?
I'm going to do a literature review, yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. Vicky, Nikki, and Lindsay, I hope you've put your titles into the word cloud as well. If not, just tell us and we can do it, but at least if we know, that's fine. Okay, anybody else?
So it's Lindsay. Sorry, I'll just put my camera on. Yes, I have just put my, I'm a ward manager. So I've been involved in a QI project within the ward over the last couple of years, and speaking with the QI team, we're looking at writing for a journal, which I have never ever done. So they've asked me to sort of join and get some thoughts on where to start, basically.
Thank you, Lindsay. Did you have any specific question, or would a generic thing would help, and then you can ask questions?
Yeah, nothing specific at the moment. I'm just here to take it all in.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, so I'm Paula Marchetti. I'm a consultant biochemist at Doncaster and Bassett Law. I've obviously done quite a bit of research in the past, but I'm also helping to sort of supervise various trainees and things like that with regards to their own proposal writing and that sort of thing. So I'm kind of here to sort of help with regards to getting some tips to sort of point them in the right direction, so that it's not just the way that I've always done it in the past, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Paula. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Vicky. I'm a surgical ACP. I'm about to start my master's dissertation to complete advanced practice, and I'm just hoping for a general overview to help me whilst I start my proposal.
Good. Okay, have I left anyone? Is there anyone else who would like to contribute, or? No? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Okay, fine. Thank you so much. That really helps, because then it allows me to kind of not go very generic and just kind of, stick to it. So during the talk, I might use the examples from nursing related aspects, but please, these are just examples, and this would relate to anything that you do. If you think the example is not related to what you to your discipline or to your specific understanding, it's okay. Just replace the example with the example that you have, and I think it should all work fine. And I'm more than happy to answer any question. So basically, this is a little exercise which I would like you to do. So when you are planning, let's suppose when you're planning a holiday somewhere, how do you make those decisions? So what do you do? I mean, all these questions are there all at once, but how do you decide where do you want to go? Anyone? Come on, you all go on holidays.
Your budget and how much time you have.
Okay, thank you, Mira. Anybody else? So you look at the budget, you look at how much time you have, and that helps you determine how far or how nearby you want to go. Yeah, okay. Anything else?
A place of interest.
Okay, and how do you know that?
look at the history of the place that you're going to, and if it's something that you're looking at going to historic places to visit, or want to understand
your
more about
interest.
it.
Yeah, so your interest, and then you try and kind of find out where those places are. Okay, anybody else?
I think just
What the family wants to
building on.
First Nikki and then the other person.
I think just building on what the other lady said there, like something, you know, it'd be like somewhere you might know a little bit about but want to know more about, so you want to experience more about it.
Okay, and who was speaking with Nikki? Sorry, I didn't catch the name.
Me, sorry. Where the family wants to go, where the children are going to be happy.
Okay, thank you, Paula. That's useful. And so there are various reasons, various different things that we consider when we're deciding, right? How do you gather information about country or suitable resort or which place? Like you've decided, okay, fine, we want to go to Turkey and we want to do this. How do you then kind of, try and find information about that particular country and suitable resort where you have to go?
We use the web. Travel agents who are specialists in the areas.
Mm-hmm.
I might
And how do you?
gone.
Yeah, and how do you? What will you do when you get conflicting options from the information that you receive? How do you make decisions? I mean, we all have that one friend who thinks everything is good, and we all have that one friend who thinks everything is bad. How do we make a decision as to what information to trust on?
TripAdvisor, other people's views.
Yeah. Okay, so the point of this exercise is that you will see that we make those decisions. It's all a step of writing sort of a proposal. Okay, so even when we do something which is like buying I don't know, something, if your life is anything like my household or my life, everything is a proposal writing sort of thing. So I wanted to buy a robot cleaner, and I thought through all of those things. Oh God, how do I do this and that and all that stuff? And then I said to my husband, said, no, they're rubbish. You don't use them. And then oh, okay, fine. So then you have to convince them why they're not rubbish, why it is useful and all the rest of the stuff. And now they're the ones who wake up in the morning and kind of press the button and use those robot cleaners than myself. So the idea is that usually people do not have the understanding of what is it that you want to do, and how do you think of the logistics and logistics around things, and make sure that something is possible and something is doable. And I don't know if you have been dealing with children these days. If your children are anything like my children, they're very well versed with all of those things. So they will come and ask you for something, but then they would have given you all the sort of options and information without leaving a room to say no for you. Can anyone identify with this? Have you noticed any of that in your life? No? Maybe I'm the unique one. So my 12 years old, if he wants to have something, he would say, well, I want to buy this, and this is the reason I want to buy it, and this is where you can get it cheaper, and that's the deal with it. So basically, and I've looked at this and this site, and all the whole of the homework you would have done. So basically, there's no room for you to say no. So proposal writing is similar. It's basically we write everything that we have an understanding of what we want to do, to leave little room for the other person to say no, and to explain what's going on in our head, because nobody can actually put a wire in your head and see what is it that you want to do. But if you can explain that on the piece of paper, that this is what I want to do, that's why this is novel, that's the reason I want to do it, this is what we are going to achieve with it, this is how we do it, this is how much time will it take, and this is how much money will it take. It just helps not only you, but the other person to understand, oh yeah, this is a good sort of, aspect of doing it. So what do you think? Why should you write a research proposal? I think we talked about this a little bit. I've just mentioned it, but who do you write it for? Who do you think we write proposals for? Anyone? You can,
My
if you don't want to speak, you can type in the
supervisor.
chat. For the supervisor, yeah, so they can understand what is it that you're doing. What else? Who else?
The person that you're directing your research to, so they understand why you've gone into it and what you hope to achieve.
So your audience, like, think when you're answering these questions, think of the maybe topic that you have in your head, and that will help me, that will make it easier for you. So for students, they're writing for their supervisors. They probably are also writing for the workplace where they want this thing to be implemented at. What else?
Anybody who might have to pay for any part of the
Okay.
project.
Yeah, somebody who may have the ability, who have the purse, who have the ability to fund what you want to do. Yeah. Anything else? Do you write it for yourself?
Yeah.
No. Okay. So
I
we
suppose, oh, sorry,
what-
Parveen. I suppose you would kind
go,
of
go.
write it for yourself as well, because you want to kind of pinpoint what you're asking as well, aren't you? So from a proposal, you kind of want to really narrow it down rather than having a very generic idea, really pinpoint it down. Because again, if you're going to try and get other people involved or get like money or funding or anything, you need to make it quite specific of what you actually want or what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. So when we want to be very succinct and we want to clearly articulate what is it that we want, so that's where writing helps, and writing a couple of times helps, because then you're writing for yourself as well. So who are you writing? So we write for various different audience. That includes yourself. That includes because you want to have a clear idea as to what you want to do, and you want to make sure that you don't change that idea as you progress through things, because things would come in way, and you want to make sure that you're consistent with it. You want to write it for your supervisors or people who are above you, who may have the ability or the control of the time that you have or the money that you need, so that they are convinced that it's a good idea and therefore they can help and support you with that particular aspect. You want to write it for supervisors or people who are supporting you, so they know what is going on in your head and they can think through as to how to enable that, and also can direct you into the right kind of direction. Okay, so then the next question is, what should you do before writing a proposal? Well, before writing a proposal, we usually need to have a research question. And then the next thing is, how do we write the proposal? So when it comes to writing a research question or having a question, why do we ask question? What do questions do? You might have heard your supervisors or anybody who is supporting with you with your study, or those who are experienced writer. The first thing is, what is the research question? So we do this because it allows us to, it gives us a direction and focus as to where we want to go and how we were. So in the earlier example where we were trying to plan a holiday, if we have thought through those questions, or if we have said, where are we going? It will allow us to see how much money do we need? How much time do we need? Which mode of travel we are going to use? How long can we go for? And all the rest of the stuff. So, and then you can decide which, as I say, which transport. So, if you have got a established or clear question, it allows you to understand all of those things better, and to find barriers and things which are affecting your way, and to be able to then think, okay, fine, this is going to happen. How am I going to solve this particular issue and move forward? It helps us in planning, as I've just said, direction and focus, and at the same time planning as to how am I going to overcome barriers that I come in. When it comes to literature review or review proposal or research proposal, it helps us in identifying or having a correct question, which then allows us to search appropriate literature. Is that, do you all agree with that? So because literature, everything, thousands of articles published on the World Wide Web on one particular topic. And if you are not careful in terms of asking a specific question, you may get inundated with too many requests of too many articles, which you will not humanly be able to sit down and review through it. So a good focused research question or review question helps us do that. By the way, the proposal for writing a review or proposal for writing a research is pretty much similar. When we are writing a proposal for review, we go through the same step, but the output is different because we are actually not really dealing with humans, but the literature which is already available. But we but we think through how we are going to do various different steps to make sure that the question is focused, the product that we want is doable and appropriate, and everything else is it is going all fine. When it comes to research proposal, it's pretty much similar, but because you're dealing with humans and probably or most of the time, then you think of some other aspects as to who you're going to talk to, how you're going to do this, and all the rest of the stuff. Again, answers to those kind of questions for review or for research are there, but they are slightly different. So you go through the same sets of principles and process, but the output that you look for probably would be slightly different. Having said that, literature searching, when you're writing a review proposal, literature searching becomes the main part of the aspect and is a bigger sort of the thing that you do, because then that would determine how many studies you identify which you're going to review. Whereas if you're writing a research proposal, literature searching is still important, but it's just one part of the puzzle and not the whole puzzle, if that makes sense. Okay. Finally, we ask questions because we want to identify appropriate methods to answer the question. You would see many people would say, oh, well, I want to do a scoping review on this, or I want to do a narrative review on this. Or you would find people would say, I want to do a qualitative study, but I don't know what the research question is. That's a wrong way of doing it. You need to have your question first to be able to then decide which methods you're going to use once to answer the question that you're asking. Is that clear? Any questions? Just drop a text. And it also provides a framework as to which direction you're going to go. So a good kind of research question as well as a literature review is something which where you see the gap in the wall and you want to say how you are going to fill that gap. So this is what we want to articulate, be it's a review question or a research question, or we are writing for a review proposal or a research proposal, that there is a gap in the wall and we want to fill this gap, and this is how we are going to do it. Okay, so any ideas of what kind of topics would you like to investigate for any of the participants who we have already here? Does anyone want to give an example?
My chosen subject for my dissertation is using antibiotics versus surgery for acute uncomplicated appendicitis.
Okay, so the effectiveness of antibiotics versus, okay, so that's what you want to look at. All right, anybody else? Anyone else? Come on, I'm not going to move if you don't speak.
Mine's really broad, but I'm looking at frail people in hospital that can't get out for whatever reason. So that I've heard termed bed blocking, like what is going on and why aren't they moving out? But I need to find an angle to focus it.
Okay, so you want to look at what affects movement of people from a hospital to a community.
Yes.
For frail people, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So the reason I was asking you this question is this one. How did you identify your topic, or where did the idea come from? So for both of you, how have you decided on the topic that you've decided? So Nikki?
Mine, I think it became more apparent during the pandemic, where we were trying to avoid surgery for patients. And whilst we already knew we could use antibiotics for acute appendicitis, the surgeon's option is always to remove the appendix. But whilst we were in challenging circumstances, that was less of an option for them. So many of them did turn to it. But now that we're out of those kind of restrictions, we're back to removing appendix again. And, you know, could we then be using the antibiotic and avoiding surgery for some of these people. So I wanted to look at the many studies that were done to try and support this through the pandemic, and there's lots of research done. So it's, as an ACP, could I make that choice of using an antibiotic in the first instance rather than referring straight to surgery?
Okay, good. Nikki, where is your question coming from?
So I'm on the wards, on the older people's wards, but earlier this year I did a 4-month pilot project in A&E, working with a geriatrician, seeing frail patients in A&E, doing a on-the-spot geriatric review to try and get people home or into beds if they needed to, rather than coming in when they might not need to. That project's finished and I'm back on the wards, and I've seen the pressure from both ends with our older people coming in, perhaps don't need to, but then stuck here forever. And then the bed pressures that's the impact that's having on A&E and on those people staying in hospital.
Okay, good. So the point I was trying to make here is, where do research questions come from? So you might have seen as your examples will come in a minute. So some of the research questions come from theory, which is an organized body of concept, generalization, and principles that can be subjected to investigation. So we already know a fact, but we want to check if that fact remains the same and if there is a change which is needed, right? So for example, the appendicitis example, there are a couple of things that you've seen. Is there is this organized theory that appendicitis, if someone gets it, so it needs to be immediate removal for XYZ reasons. But now that people have tried doing it slightly differently, so we want to see if it still works, or is there any alternative way of doing it? It comes from personal observation and experiences, as you both have stated, and it also comes from that, maybe there is a research done at one particular place, but there's a room to replicate somewhere else. Now, I'm talking about here a drastic sort of differences into the setting. So, for example, 2 years back, I was doing a similar workshop in Pakistan in one of the universities. So one cardiac surgeon gave a very good example, and I like to call that one. Or it wasn't a cardiac surgeon, it was a cardiologist. So what they said, that a lot of the treatment options that we have for cardiology patients are based on the treatment of cardiology problems is based on the height and weight of the how big or small your heart is, and how big or small your heart is depending on the height and weight of you, like as a person. So a lot of research that's being done is on white Caucasian people, and therefore the treatment decisions which are made or treatment decisions which are available, they are based on that particular population. Whereas if you go to, for example, China or Pakistan or India or some of those places, we are not very tall, we are small people, and therefore our height and weight is different, and therefore our heart size is different, and therefore the treatment that you give for heart-related problems may or may not be different, and they wanted to understand that. So does that make sense? So can you see the need for why they would like to do that research and replicate that full established body of research, which is already happening in one part of the world, but why they want to do in another part of the world? I mean, you might say, well, it's working, the treatment is working, everything is fine. Why do we need to do this? But can you actually see the need for it? Yes or no? Just write in the chat box. Yeah. So in those kind of situations, you want to replicate the study in another population and try and see if that still exists or not. And the research questions also come from identified gaps in the literature or evidence, that where you think there is something is being studied for quite a long time, but we want to see what is the evidence or what is the gap in the literature that we want to fill up. So the systematic reviews or literature reviews are usually a best way of identifying the gaps in the literature. And then it is, what is it that you do with that gap? So how do you fill that gap in terms of, it could be either by reviewing the literature and coming up with what other people have done and can we apply into our setting, or coming up with a research question and then going and finding that out and trying to implement into practice. So those who are writing research proposals for themselves, that's the rationale that, we want to have a question, and that's the rationale that we want to write a specific question where the question is coming from. I want to go to moon and want to do research there, but do I have the capacity and resources and the ability to do it? This is another thing that we need to think when we want to develop research question. So sometimes my ACP students and other people come and say, well, I want to compare this medication with that medication, see which one is working better. So for example, paracetamol and ibuprofen is a very good example in closure of ducts for pediatric patients or neonatal patients. So they come up with that kind of question quite a lot of time. And my usual question to them usually is that, okay, fine, even if you've identified a difference, what is it that you can do in practice to make the change? Okay, because if it is something where NICE or a big place is already working on and is an ACP, you probably don't hold the responsibility or the ability to change the practice. It would be down to somebody else. Should you actually be doing something around that? And sometimes it's not that you shouldn't, it's just about thinking how you're going to make a difference and make use of those findings that you have identified into changing the practice, because you've spent quite a lot of time doing that. How do you make sure that it's working? So common problems that people encounter when developing a question, and this is also about the supervisors who support students developing question, is that deciding which topic or area to look for. It's a bit like, I usually give this example, it's a bit like deciding what do we have for tea in the evening. Okay, we start off with very broad question and we think about this and that, and we end up something kind of pretty similar. Can anyone relate to it? How do you decide what to have tea in the evening? Is that a big problem or is it easier for you? Can someone explain how do you do that?
For me, it's the world. To be fair, it's the worst decision ever that you have to make it every day. It's like adult life. You have to decide that every single day. So for me, it usually depends on the time scale that I've got when I get in, what's actually in, what we've had already that week. Do I feel guilty as a mum if I just give them something out of the freezer? So a few things kind of go through my mind before I make that decision.
And what do you end up with eventually?
Usually a mixture of all sorts, but no, usually I come up with kind of a plan, or for me, because I know at weekends and everything else, they tend to get a little bit spoiled. I try and come up with some kind of food that's kind of the kids like, that is easy for everybody and quite nutritious. But yeah, it's usually a bit of a carnage situation beforehand.
Isn't it? And sometimes you can't, with the best will in the world, you can't help it, and you have to go to the cupboard and perhaps kind of get the pasta
frozen,
or
yes, I got something that's really, yes,
because that's quick and that's what's going to do it. So what you see is that it's about convenience, it's about time, it's about finances, it's about what's in the fashion, what somebody would like, it's about what did we have yesterday. All of those things make that decision. And as a supervisor, this is usually a very common question that people come and ask us and say, can you please tell me what research question do I work on? Well, actually, I can't tell you what research question do you go for, because a bit like what do you want to have in the tea, I'm going to tell you something Pakistani that, have a biryani or something like that, which you might not like doing it. So it's what you have in your cupboard, what you like, what you don't like, how much time and everything else. What I can do is help you decide better and make those decisions. But what I can't do is make a decision for you. So this is one of the things I usually would say, well, why don't you come up with 2 or 3 questions and I can help you make those questions specific and decide which one is better for you. So the other problem that we come up with is inability to think of a topic. And I think you all will be able to relate to this, because it is about, I'm going through this at the moment. So I'm supporting some master students. I mean, it happens all the time, but this time I'm supporting some master students in one of the universities in a developing country. And 2 of these students come up with a question, and then 2 days later, they send an email saying, oh, well, I did this, this, and this. Can I change my topic to this? And then they come back, can I change my topic to this? So they can't really decide which topic to stay on, because they want an easy life or they want something simple, which everything is going to be complicated and everything is difficult. So you got to appreciate that. So that's the other problem. So for all of us to understand that this is part of the process, and if you think that, oh, well, it sounds too difficult, I don't want to do it, you probably would want to look for something else. Knowing which specific area or topic, for example, to focus on is another issue that many people have. Or the best one is inability to clearly articulate a question. So you want to do something, but you don't know how do you articulate this a question specifically? Can anyone relate to this?
I can relate to all of that.
Can you? Yeah. Okay. So, and there is no easy way of doing it apart from just keep on writing it and improving it, because the only way to clarify or improve it is by writing it down and then specifying it, or going too quickly. So trying to rush it through, oh, well, I've spent all afternoon and I just can't come up with a question. Well, it can take months to come up with questions. So we want everything to be done very, very quickly, and things usually are not that quick. So it's a slow burner. Common mistakes, wanting to change the world. So, you would find people who want to, and this is a common problem with PhD students, especially master students to some extent as well. They want to change the world and they want to, and when you try and help them specify a question and say, well, it's a bit too much and you need to kind of, be a bit more specific, they just don't like it because they wanted to change the world. And my usual example usually here is that, have you seen that needle which has got a small little place for the thread to go from it? Be it's a stitching needle or kind of the one which we use at home for hemming or stitching clothes. Have you seen that little hole? Somebody or more than one person have done PhDs on that small little hole and have written more than 300,000 or 200,000 words thesis on this. So nothing in the world is small. And once you dive into it, you will see it's a big, big thing. It's only that we can't see it. So therefore, having a specific question and having a specific thing helps. So when people want to change the world, the thing is that you're unlikely to change the world. There's always an alternative view, and the project will be too ambitious. So that's the problem with it. When you want to prove something, so a good example, usually, depending on the audience, that when people want to prove that, oh, well, I'm going to say this works, or for example, love marriage and arranged marriage works. Nothing is the question is philosophically flawed, and you won't be able to prove anything because there is always an alternative view. And research proves nothing, but gives you more questions and raises more points to consider forward. And then decide, or sometimes what people decide on first. And can you hear me okay, everybody?
You've gone a little bit interrupted, but it's better now.
Oh, okay, sorry. So, and sometimes what people do is they decide on the methods first. So as I said earlier, so thinking that I'm going to do a qualitative research, but haven't thought through your question. So you need to be clear on your research question, and you need to be, before you move on. So these are a few things. Consider, and the other thing which we need to think of if you're choosing a research topic for ourselves, or if you're helping somebody else to choose a research topic, is that which topics are researchable. So researchable topics are those which can be investigated through collection and analysis of data, be it's research or be it's a review that you want to do. They are conducted ethically and have theoretical or practical significance and contribute to educational or research processes, and can be adequately researched given the expertise, resources, and time constraints that you have. There are many topics which are non-researchable, so philosophical or ethical issues. Like, for example, if we go on and say, well, we would like to prove if the God exists or not. Well, it's a philosophical issue. What is it that we are going to do with it? How can we actually prove that? Because we cannot collect and analyze the data on this. What about something, for example, we want to have the treatment for COVID-19, but for that we want to inject people with the infection first. Well, it's ethically wrong and we can't do it. Should questions, things which are like, should we do this, should we do that, these are ultimately opinion related pieces, because they well, you might argue that they are researchable, but basically you're not going to end up solving the problem. They're just point of views, and a matter of opinion could be different. I'll skip this one. So how should you write a proposal? That's the next bit that people usually come up with. So up until now, what we discussed, and why do we need to have a proposal? Who are we writing it for? And what should you do before writing proposal? Any questions so far? Is it all making sense, or is it too difficult or too stupid and not useful?
No, it's all making quite good sense up to now.
Okay. So that once we've decided the research question, we've decided that, okay, fine, this is the reason we are going to write it now, to do it now. And that's the reason my supervisor is asking me to just write a small kind of, I don't know, 1 page or 2 pager sort of thing, how you're going to do it. And this is the reason we are doing it. And next thing is, how do you write proposal? Well, what if you have an idea, but you don't know what to do? You're not alone. What you need to do is, once you have an idea, talk to somebody else, get help from an expert. So if you're doing a program, talk to your academic supervisor or your course tutor. They may be able to help you. You're not the only ones doing that particular topic. There have been, the amount of students who have done, who have compared paracetamol to ibuprofen, in the past 7-8 years, is just huge. So I have seen that topic going on every year in and year out. And I can tell you what's going to work or not. I usually don't, because it's like you think, okay, fine, I would like you to go through the review process to understand that. But talk to somebody, because then what they could do is they could help you improve or specify your question better. Okay, or ask you a question which will help you make your question better. Who is an expert? Go for a nice one. No, don't go for somebody who thinks they're an expert, but they would tell you, oh, well, everything is wrong and you can't do this. Or somebody who would just say, well, yeah, go about it, and do not really help you or critique you with that. Okay, so you don't want both of those sorts of things. So the idea probably is talk to more than one people and then make a mind. Things to think about. So for any proposal, usually these are the steps that you need to follow. So if you're writing a proposal for a research body or for a funding grant for a bigger sort of body, you will still go through the same sort of questions. Nowadays, they don't necessarily ask you to have a standalone proposal, but they may have asked these questions into question boxes that you need to fill in, because they give you specific word allowance and stuff. But pretty much the same thing needs to be done if you're doing it for your proposal for yourself, or if you're filling up an application form for any particular funding body. Things that you need to think through are pretty similar, but then there may be some more questions which are specific to the body where you're applying for. So those would be different. So usually a proposal is about 2,000 to anything between 2,000, but probably 2,500 to 3,500 word document. Anything between 2,500 to 3,000 is usually sufficient. Anything more is a bit too much. People don't want to read. Anything less, you may not be able to kind of justify and explain things that you have, but that's usually a good length of the proposal. What do you have in that? First is introduction, in which you talk about the problem and the background as to why it is a problem. Remember, you have got a lot of knowledge. Like, for example, Victoria, you're looking at the antibiotics and the surgical removal of the appendicitis. So, you have got lots of information about what is appendicitis, why it is a problem, why treating this is really useful thing to do, why, what has happened over COVID and how things have changed. what is the problem here? Why do you think it is important to study? And what will you get out of it if your study is useful? Okay. You know all of that in your head, but I don't. Okay. So even if this person is expert, so never assume knowledge and give them this information, the background information of the problem as to why you think this is the problem, what is actually a problem, why is it important to solve that problem, and what would be the implications for of research for the practice. Then it comes to literature review, where if what we want to do is we want to, regardless you are doing a review, or you're writing a proposal for a review of literature, or you're writing a proposal for research, the chances are pretty much similar that you want to explain what do we already know about the problem, what is the strength and weaknesses of existing literature, and what are the gaps in the literature. Okay, so you go through systematic process of doing it and explaining, but that's the crux that we want to state. This is what we already know with current research. These are the gaps in the current research. That's the strength and weaknesses of the thing. And that's the why my study is important. And these are the research questions that I want to focus on. Sometimes your research question come earlier on into the introduction after the problem statement and you describe aims and objectives. Most of the time they come after you've described the problem, implications and everything else, and then you have given a little bit of literature, describe what the literature says, what are the gaps, and what your research question or review question is, and why do you want to use that one. How do you develop research or review question? Well, we talked about where the questions are coming from. If you're developing a review question, there are quite a lot of frameworks which help you to make those questions. For example, PICO, PEICO, which is Population Intervention Comparison and Outcome, PEO, SPICE, Eclipse. There are various different models which allow you or which facilitate you to think through various aspects of the question that you want to ask, and then give you a very specific question which helps you find appropriate literature. Mind you, these development frameworks are made for the developing review question, not necessarily research question. Having said that, you could use those frameworks to think about the research question that you want to develop and specify. It just gives you an aid to think through this and kind of, think about various different aspects that you want to have in your research question. Once you have done this, then you need to think of the study design as to, okay, fine, you've told me what is the problem. You've told me why is it important to study that problem and what is it that we are going to get out of it. Now you tell me how you are going to study that problem, how you're going to conduct that research. This is where you need to think of setting. Where are you going to conduct that? The sample and sample size, who would you be talking to? Where are you going to get them from? How are you going to identify and recruit them in your study? What modes of data collection will you use? How you will analyze the data. Now, I have just summed up this in one sentence, but all of these aspects in itself are bigger chunks of information. And it doesn't change if it's a review proposal or a research proposal, because if it's a research proposal, you'll talk about all these things: setting, sample, recruitment, data collection, and data analysis. If it's a review proposal, you will talk about which studies are eligible. So this is in your sample, what is your inclusion and exclusion criteria, which study you're going to include and which studies you're going to exclude. And when you're writing a research proposal, this is where you will think of these aspects in the sample size. Setting, where are you going to conduct the study? And if you're doing a review proposal, you will think of what studies you're going to include and which databases you're going to choose or use to identify various different studies. How you're going to identify participants for your study in terms of recruitment. And when if it's a review proposal, you will think of which studies you're going to include and how you're going to identify them. Like, how would you go from a very broad, which keywords you're going to use, how you're going to say that, the studies. Things like, for example, studies published in last 10 years on this particular topic, only qualitative studies or only quantitative studies or whatever you want to do. Data collection, research-wise, you will say how you're going to collect the data, and review-wise, how you're going to extract the data from the studies that you are looking at, how you're going to look at the quality of the included studies that you want to include it. And data analysis, if it's research, you will explain how you will analyze the data. And if it's review, you will explain how would you analyze the data, come up with themes, or basically report the findings of this. Then, of course, you need to think of other issues, which relates to funding. Where's the funding coming from? How much funding do you need? And all that aspects. Ethical issues, which you can come across when you're doing this research, be it's a review or research. And how would you encounter that? Who is in your team, research team, like who is going to help you with all of the various different aspects that you need to do, resources that you need, and timeline. One of the things which students or anyone generally makes a mistake, students mostly, is that they just describe it, I'm going to do this, this, and this, but you don't tell me why you're doing this and how you're going to do this. Okay, so if you're saying that I'm going to conduct this study in Doncaster Hospital in the surgical department, why have you chosen that surgical department, and why have you chosen Doncaster Hospital? Why not Butler or Sheffield or something else? Okay, so rationalization and justifications of your suggestions that you want to do is the bigger thing when you're writing proposal, because it's not your, if you say I'm going to do this, this, and this, what you want me to do is use my own brain and come up with kind of, reasons of why you're doing this, whereas you don't want to do that. You want to give the person the whole thing and help them understand this is what I'm going to do, and that's the rationalization of doing this. So to explain this, I've explained, I don't know, I came up with this example while standing on the dais explaining students 2 weeks ago in Pakistan, is that when you have just described that this is the setting, this is a sample, this is recruitment, this is data collection, and without giving explanation that why you're doing it, it's in a way what you're doing is you have invited me as a guest in your house, and you've given me, like, let's suppose if you're going to cook, I don't know, a meal, and you've given me the ingredients right in front of me, and you've put them on the table, and now you want me to cook that and eat it. Okay, whereas if I'm your guest, what you would like to do is present the whole thing, cook it, present it nicely, and then want me to eat it. Does that make sense? So usually there are these 3 chapters, chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3, where these are sections, if you call it, where this information is going to go. And so basically a research project is, what will you do? Why will you do it? How will you do it? And how will you know that you have done it, and how you're going to report it? These are the aspects that you want to write and you want to tell people in the project. What will you do is your research question or review question or aims and objectives. Why will you do it is your background literature and gaps to be filled. Why do you want to do it? How will you do it is your design and method section, where you explain what, how you're going to do all that. How will you know that you have done it? By analyzing it and by explaining. And how are you going to report it? Because the thing is not done until it's written up and disseminated to other people. And then you need to think of who's going to do what, task distribution. And it's always good to have kind of a Gantt chart where you've kind of made this thing about when you're going to do what, because that then allows you, it never, when you make a Gantt chart, don't think that your things are going to plan. If you have decided something to end at week 2, it's going to end at week 2. It probably won't. But if it won't, you will know how much it has deviated from the baseline, and how, what is it that you can do to make sure that it's within time and complete the task. Okay, it gives you a planning space, and you could just see how things needs to go forward. So research process is basically a series of steps to conduct research. The specific stages of the process that you go through depends on the nature of the research or review, but will always follow a systematic pattern. And rigor in research is fundamental. If the work is to be trustworthy and free from bias, you need to think of why you're doing it and how you're going to maintain quality. And writing synopsis or proposal basically means thinking through what you want to do and how you want to do it. Okay, so thank you so much for listening. And this is another one. And this is the last slide, which I want to get to. If you need to have the address and everything else, you could use this. And you've got Sarah's address anyway. So I'll stop sharing and let's take questions. So first of all, has that been useful in some ways?
Yes.
Come on.
Yeah, it's been useful. I'm starting to think about focusing a little bit more while we've been talking. It's been very useful. Thank you.
Any questions? You could use examples that you have or the questions that you wanted to develop, but you're not very clear about, or anything that comes to your mind. No, no one wants to ask any questions? Paula, was that useful for you? Do you have any questions?
Yeah, no, it was really useful. Thank you. I think, yeah, that's kind of how I would talk about going through it, but it's just always good to get another perspective. I did like your diagram with the sort of the things to think about and sort of consolidating it. I think, yes, you're right. A lot of people do come to you with, I want to do XYZ, COPD or something, but actually they haven't sort of honed it down to a specific question. And I do know when I was a PhD student, you do want to change the world and you do want your research to be viable and valuable, but even a negative result is a result. And I think that's something that's very difficult for people to sort of take on board. But yes, thank you. That was really helpful.
And also in the world that we live in, where we want to give feedback, even that, you know, when we want to say something to somebody that is not going to work, but you still have to find positive ways of saying it, which is fine. But sometimes people don't necessarily always kind of, you know, appreciate what you, and I think there is another thing. So as the world is becoming more diverse, so people are coming from all over the world. So it's like saying it in a cryptic way may not always be easier for people to understand. And how do you then kind of, you know, try and make sure that, well, this probably, which makes the job very difficult, isn't it?
Parveen, Charlotte's asked in the chat, is there a template for the structure of a research proposal?
Okay, Charlotte, depending on what is it that you're writing a research proposal for? Like usually the structure of a research proposal is like that you write introduction, background, methods, which has got setting, sample, you know, the diagram which I've just presented. If you use that one, it usually suffices sort of any proposal that you make. Depending on the funding body that you're going to go for, they may, nowadays they have given different sort of questions. So everyone seems to have designed their own, what do you call it? The template where they ask you various different questions, things that we haven't covered here, that funding bodies would also ask you about public and patient involvement as to how you have involved people into it. How do you know that, you know, this is going to make changes? So there is no one single template that you can use. This is the generic one, introduction, methods, how you're going to do that. If you have thought through these things for your proposal, you can translate them into any template that you like. And then you have to think of the additional questions that that those funding applications are asking for. The problem with the research process and the problem with the way we present is like when you're sitting in a group like this and when we all are talking, and I may have made sounded like very easy to understand, or well, you do bang, 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 you do this, this, and this, and you're done. But the real life is not that easy, is it? So you go, it's not a linear process. It's a kind of a cyclical sort of thing where you have to think through various different things. So don't be worried if you think you come up with research question and you think of kind of setting and sample, and then you think actually probably it's not going to happen. It's not an easy thing. And then you have to go back and think of your research question again and change it, change sort of thing. It's about thinking through the questions that you have, thinking through how you're going to plan it, how you're going to do it, and make sure that you've documented or you've kind of thought through those decisions. A bit like planning the holiday. Okay, it's very easy to say if you're going to Turkey or if you're going to Spain, take a plane and do this, but it's not that easy, is it? So you have to go through various different aspects and smaller different idiosyncrasies that which they want to have. So research is similar. Depending on the funding bodies, you may come across different template. The usual one is these aspects that you need to think. Okay, and
we've got another question that came up in chat, Parveen, if you want that one too. It's an interesting one about reframing research. Kate says, I'm writing a PhD proposal about patient experience, but via the sociology department, not nursing.
Do you have any advice regarding reframing? PhD proposal about patient experience, but via sociology department. So there are some disciplinary differences. So Kate, are you a nurse? I don't, okay. Yes, you are. Okay. The problem with us healthcare professionals and nurses is, my interpretation, and you don't have to agree with it, is that we are very, most nurses who I see, or as I say, it's my interpretation, that we want to solve the problem. So we cannot complain about problem for too long. We want to say, okay, this is the problem. Okay, fine. What are we going to do with it? Sociological studies or sociologists, they want to understand the problem and the complexity of the problems. So they spend a lot of time trying to understand the problems because they want to, their premise probably is that understanding the problem will help solving the problem. So I think that probably is a bigger thing that you're going to encounter when you're moving or writing a proposal for the sociological studies. Fundamentally, it's not different in terms of what is required to write a proposal, but how do you frame the question and how in-depth sociological or theories that you rely on probably would be different within an applied discipline such as health or nursing and sociology. But principle-wise, it's pretty much similar. It's just how you use the sections on background and literature review, and how do you explain your problem effectively. That is going to be slightly different. Does that answer your question? Okay, so I'm going to go do check out our library book stock. Yeah, so it doesn't matter what your discipline is, it's just how you articulate. So I was unable to attend the research question meeting. Is this also on your tubes as I am trying to refine my question? Yes, Victoria, there are different sessions on research. I can't remember what else is there, but have a look at various different videos and you hopefully would be able to find something, but I'm more than happy to meet and help you with that. That's not a problem at all. Okay, developing a research question. Yeah, Sarah has shared that one. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Anybody else? I think the trouble usually is that when we are very much focused on the work that we are doing. So for example, I do evidence-based practice modules for my students, and it's difficult to get students engaged to look at each other's review questions or research questions and help people move it for various different reasons. One is that people think my question would be stolen by somebody else, so they don't trust each other. Secondly, people don't want to comment on other people's research or review questions because they feel like, who am I to critique, or, I don't know nothing and therefore I can't say much. So there are various different reasons which are barriers in terms of engaging with other people. But talking your research question or review question to somebody else, or kind of discussing it, will help you think through things and make it clearer. And this will also help you see how people have designed research questions. And this is one of the aspects that literature review also helps you with, that because you will come up with a question, you look at the literature and you will see that, the same research question is worded by somebody else slightly differently, and that probably is better version than yours. And it helps you then think through how you're going to improve your question or the methodology that you do. So therefore, like Paula was saying earlier on, it's not that, we, all of us in a way, write proposal and write all of those things and help students and everything else. So it's not that, what I've presented to you is completely different. It's just that it's good to hear from somebody else to then think, well, actually, is there any way I could kind of, use something better, or maybe my way of doing is better anyway. And, maybe I could kind of talk to somebody about that. So I would suggest engage with the literature and engage with other people to see if there is a way. It just helps you think through your question better, actually. And once you've written, one of the things which I haven't covered here, once you've written a proposal, a lot of the problem, a lot of the time, what people do is they write something and then they just think, oh, well, this is done. Writing is only an initial part of the process. Writing takes less time. It's the editing, improving, and proofreading which takes a lot of time to bring things into the shape. Okay, so spend a lot of time when you've written an outline or the whole proposal that you've written. It's not a done job, because what you've written at that time is how you were thinking through it, and you just kept on writing and it's all done. Take a break once you've written something, go back to the same thing again, read it as if it is written by somebody else, and then improve it. So maybe go back after 2 days, 3 days, give yourself enough time to write and review the document that you have written. The other thing which also helps is asking somebody else to read it for you, because what they can do is they can look at the aspects that you have written and they can give you feedback. It's up to you if you choose or not to choose their feedback, but it certainly helps you think through things. Any questions? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Please do have a look for our feedback link. I'm going to stick it in chat again because I'm relentless. But give us your feedback on today's webinar. We would very much appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah, please do let us know how you thought, even here, or if you just want to, please do fill us the form for us, because if people don't fill us a form and if you don't know if it's useful, then you just think, what's the point of doing all of that kind of, going through all of that hassle if it's not useful. So and also if you think there needs to be something else at the topics or something needs to be improved, please do tell us, and that's really helpful. Okay. So thank you, everybody. If there is nothing else there are no other questions, and if you all are happy with it, so thank you so much for joining us. Do give us your feedback, and we do ideas clinic. So if you want to talk about your review question or anything else or research questions, I'm more than happy to help and support you. I would suggest do try and kind of link it with your work that you're doing. It helps you in various different ways. One is that it helps you, it makes it easier for you to do something because you already know aspects in practice, and it makes it easier for you to write. It helps you improve practice where you're working, and it helps you build your profile, because it's easier to work with the teams that, I mean, in some ways it's difficult, but it still is a place where you can you have more room to change the practice because you are an expert in that particular place. Whereas if you go and find a topic that you like but you don't have expertise in, you're going to spend more time doing implementing the changes or trying to do the stuff that you need to do, and you will have to develop new networks and new connections. So think of those two things, and I'm more than happy to talk to anyone who would like to ask any question. Just drop myself or Keely an email, my admin, and she'll be able to find a place in my diary. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining. I'll stop the recording.